Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It's Friday, March 27th, 2026. I'm Carleen Johnson, the Center Square's state government reporter, and we are winding down the clock on final days for Washington Governor Bob Ferguson to sign the income tax bill, Senate Bill 6346. Rumors are circulating it will be Monday, but there's nothing on the governor's calendar. Tuesday would be it. That's when the clock runs out. So we have no reason to think he will not sign the bill at this point. He's given no indication. There could be some section vetoes. And then what? Of course, initiative campaigns, lawsuits, all of that very likely, and likely to be this year, as I'm told, for an initiative to the ballot. Going to be a very tight window because by the time the governor signs and an initiative ballot title request goes to the Secretary of State, he signs off on that, and initiative groups are able to get out there on the streets with their printed off petitions across the state. It's likely to be a very narrow window. Early July would be the deadline for having all of that turned in for certification. So it's going to be a tight timeline if, in fact, an initiative campaign to potentially repeal the income tax is launched this year. We are in close contact with all the players, so we're staying on top of that. Then a difficult conversation with We Heart Seattle founder Andrea Suarez. Now, Andrea has been on the streets, in the parks, picking through the trash, where drug dens have overtaken Seattle parks and sidewalks. Her nonprofit is not funded by the city. And Housing First, low barrier drug housing, she's really just the exact opposite of that. And she has spent many years trying to push back on the narrative that if everybody on the streets just has a house, they'll stop using drugs. Obviously, that hasn't worked. We've poured more money than ever into this problem in the city of Seattle, King County, and actually statewide, and the problem has only gotten exponentially worse. So she put up a video this week showing open drug use inside one of Seattle's tiny home villages within the Inner Bay community. Apparently, staff knew that there's open drug use going on inside one of the tiny homes within that village. But did taxpayers know? They're footing the bill for this? So she exposed that. She's now getting some pushback by operators of the tiny home village. So you're going to hear from her and see some of that video. And then Pew Research is out with a new report on states across the nation rainy day funds. Supposed to be funds that we don't tap into unless there's really a legit emergency. It's truly raining, right? Last year, the report shows that Washington had the second lowest reserves, and they calculate it based on how many days you have of rainy day reserve. So if something really goes down, how many days do you have to keep things going if there's no more money pouring into state coffers? We were at number 2 lowest last year. Before this year, Democrats rated the rainy day fund. So are we moving to number 1 for lowest reserves in our fund? We're going to find out. More on that to come in today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. So here we go. Okay, there's a rally planned in Olympia at noon Saturday at the Capitol to push back on the income tax bill. And we at the Center Square will be there. So you'll have all the updates on Monday for that in case you relax and spend time with your family over the weekend like you should. There are also No Kings rallies planned nationwide. You may have seen some reports on that. This is your warning to watch out for the anti-Trump rally goers, or if you're inclined to join them, there are probably, wherever you live, rallies planned in your own community. So we're going to be bringing you some video from both of those sort of counter rallies over the weekend. And again, Governor Ferguson is expected to sign Senate Bill 6346, the so-called millionaires tax, either Monday or Tuesday. That would be it. That's the last day for him to sign. No indications he's given that he will not sign the bill as it passed the legislature at the very end of session. So we're, again, going to be attending both of those Raleigh events over the weekend and also watching for the governor's calendar, because sometimes that's updated over the weekend as to what he's doing on Monday, Tuesday. So we'll let you know as soon as we know. The governor did sign a bill today at an event in Everett, a bill that received a lot of heated opposition in public hearings, and a bill that we covered here at the Center Square, to take away basically city and county officials' ability to decide where and what type of supportive housing they want in their communities for the homeless and for often drug addicted individuals. So this legislation, which is now law, based on today's signature from Governor Ferguson in a signing ceremony that he did in Everett earlier today, that basically requires cities and planning counties within urban growth areas to allow transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, indoor emergency shelters, indoor emergency housing they called step housing in these zones, regardless of whether the city or the county has passed local ordinances in opposition, where they say, okay, we won't say we won't have this in our community, but it's not going to be near a school. It's not going to be near a playground. It's not going to be near, a church with a preschool, that kind of a thing. Now the state is basically taking away the authority for any of that local jurisdictional control for where these places are going to be housed. So here was Governor Ferguson at today's bill signing.
Permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, and emergency housing, also known as step housing, support some of our most vulnerable Washingtonians. Expanding it is an important step to ensuring more residents have a safe place to call home. House Bill 2266 ensures that step housing can be built more quickly and predictably all across Washington state. Specifically, House Bill 2266 creates clear statewide standards for permitting, treating these housing types like any other residential housing.
So related to this come efforts to expose how some of these programs that are designed on the surface to help people, that some suggest are making things dramatically worse. So a few days after a video that went viral was posted on X showing a taxpayer-funded tiny house village in Seattle's Inner Bay neighborhood being used as a safe house for drug abuse, the operators of that village then kicked out the nonprofit founder who helped to expose the situation. This was a video, and here you can see part of it, posted by We Heart Seattle founder Andrea Suarez. Inner Bay Tiny House Village.
And this is the drug house right here for people that do drugs.
What?
So you can come do your drugs. If you're going to do Fetty or something, you come in here and do it. No animals are allowed. And you come in there to do your Fetty. Nobody says anything or anything. And Narcan's up here, but...
What about foil? Are they passing out supplies to do it? You
No.
gotta get that here at home. Wow,
No.
what a depressing. Look at this chair. It's like a suicide tank.
Heater. Usually it's full of people.
Really?
Yeah, it's the end of the month. So everybody's running out of money.
Oh, boy.
It's funny because like the drug dealers or something, they're in there smoking with people. Nobody's in their room doing fentanyl. They do it there and have a problem. There'll be somebody around close that can deliver the Narcan.
And as you see here, this has shown a resident of the Inner Bay Village tiny home community showing Suarez around the property, focused on an empty tiny home with a few chairs inside. The resident telling Andrea Suarez that this is where other residents go inside to use hard drugs, including lethal fentanyl, often with the drug dealer who, according to the resident, also lives in the village.
People who don't know, the definition of harm reduction is to give, and housing first, is to give people a place to live, to stabilize, put the oxygen mask on so that they can have a better chance at accessing resources, treatment, and mental health care versus a tent. But what we saw there, and what we've always known, is that drug use is allowed inside the tiny house villages, inside the individual homes. And this particular village went to as far as giving a dedicated tiny house village, excuse me, a dedicated tiny house that volunteers built. And the whole Hope Foundation, the Hope Factory rather, is, and again, don't hate the player, hate the game, building these tiny houses. They're cute. People sign the walls, welcome home. And then they just often turn into trap houses and drug dens and places to have your friends over and use drugs. And what we saw at this, again, particular village was a designated house for, as you heard the gentleman, the resident say, the dealer often will use with their buyer. And in the name of keeping people alive, never using a loan, making sure people don't overdose and die inside their houses. And it's just really defeating and morally wrong, in my opinion. I don't think taxpayers honestly know that many of these villages are just that. They are not stabilization centers. They're supervised consumption sites. And for argument's sake, just call them what they are. So we're not calling each other out on what it is. And then we can debate as to whether or not we should be funding on property land, public land with public dollars, with volunteer built homes, if they should just be sanctuary places for drug users to use.
So again, We Heart Seattle and founder Andrea Suarez has spent the last 5.5 years cleaning up Seattle parks and other drug-infested areas, and then building relationships with the users. I've been out with her on the streets, and I have seen how she and her team interact with the drug-addicted folks that are on the streets of Seattle. People that many she's gotten to know, that she's watched them die. Even after getting them into housing, in the name of get them into housing and that will save their life. It has not in many cases. She has names of these people on a wall inside the We Heart Seattle office in downtown Seattle, people that have died, people who she tried to help. And, drug addiction is a difficult thing to overcome. But the most difficult part for a lot of people to face in this, she says, is people getting trapped in this cycle. What now this often means for them. And this is, again, difficult to watch and difficult to hear. But if we're not going to do something to really address this crisis and do something to really get at what is the crux of keeping these people trapped in this cycle of addiction, and the officials in the city and across the state really who are supposedly trying to help them need to address that this is the reality for these people and what they're doing to keep themselves in this cycle of addiction.
A very naive minded person who's just like, this is about housing, forgets, because that's not the headline, that this is a drug crisis. And so they're not thinking about that person never gets treatment, and they don't realize that that person has to do sex trade, siphon gas, flip their stamp cards, porch prowl, car smash and grab, retail theft, broken windows in these small businesses. They don't realize, what are they doing all day to get the drugs? They are wreaking havoc in our communities. And the most grim thing I keep hearing over and over again, because things are getting harder to steal. Windows are getting, people are putting cages around the ice cream and cages around the dish soap and cages around the diapers, that people are more and more going to prostitution, Carleen. I mean, people are doing $10 tricks to get an hour's worth of drug. It's rampant. I mean, you go into these parks and say, hey, you trust me, my name's Andrea, we've worked together, Hector, what's the number one thing people are doing out here to get their drug money? And he says prostitution, men and women. And there's perverted people that drive through these parks waving money out of their car, and they know exactly what they're doing when they get in the back of that car or go down the road or go to the massage parlor, that they know that they're doing it so they don't have to steal, that they're not going to be able to boost and fence because, we're breaking those up. And that is the, unintended consequence. Often, you think, well, they're not going to steal, but now they're doing this very dark side of, sex work, and the sex worker activists are like, this is a good thing. And I'm like, it fuels the drug market. It's a supply chain element of the drug market.
So I'm putting up an article today at the centersquare.com Washington's page, but I did reach out to the Low Income Housing Institute, Lehigh. They're the ones who run this Inner Bay Village that we've been talking about today. I got no response. I also reached out to Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson's office for comment because she's expanding some of these tiny home villages. No comment. And I reached out as well to the King County Regional Homeless Authority, who has spent a huge amount of taxpayer resources over the last 20 years in the name of helping this crisis, and it has only worsened. Again, I received no response, and I did reach out multiple times starting yesterday in anticipation of reporting on this today. So it is disappointing not to at least receive the courtesy of a response to address a crisis that is not only draining taxpayers across the state, but killing our residents every single day. So that's that one. Okay, so after years of record highs, state's rainy day fund capacity, the number of days that reserve balances can cover state operations if nothing more is being fed in, that fell in fiscal year 2025. And that was the first decline since the Great Recession, which is kind of like 2008, 2007 to 2009, I guess, technically. So as of the end of last year, of fiscal year 2025, the median in the rainy day fund balance was for 47.8 days. And again, that's how many days any state, if you don't have anything else in your rainy day fund, if you just stop right now, that's what you have, you can survive. So 47.8 is the median. And that was down from a record of 54.5 days in the previous year, fiscal 2024. So I guess we've done some good things after the pandemic to sort of beef up those rainy day funds. And maybe it was because we saw, real emergencies can happen like COVID, and we better get that beefed back up. According to this new data from the National Association of State Budget Officers, as reported by Pew Research, Washington is second to last now for the number of days of rainy day funds that we have in reserves. And this was before this year's rating of the rainy day fund, because we did that this year. We took a giant chunk away for the general fund, some expenses that majority Democrats wanted in the operating budget, and also $500 million of that was redirected into the Climate Commitment Act. So I want you to look at this graphic, which is from the Pew Trust, which indicates that New Jersey reported 0 days worth of operating costs in reserve after draining its, fund for the second time since the pandemic. And other states with the smallest rainy day reserves as a share of operating costs are, number 2, Washington at 12.8 days, followed by Illinois, Delaware, and then Rhode Island. But again, this is before Washington's majority Democrats rated the rainy day fund for this year's operating budget. So I don't know if that puts us at number 1 now or where this puts us. I asked Paige at Pew Charitable Trust. She had not yet run the numbers based on, our recently approved state operating budget. So she's promised to get back to me on that, but she couldn't say now if in fact we're number 1. It's not a number 1 that we want. And I should note too that our state treasurer, Mike Pelliciotti, before majority Democrats approved this, he urged them to find any alternate solution to balancing the budget rather than drawing from the state's emergency savings account. He said, this doing it during a period of economic uncertainty carries a lot of risks. And, when we rated it before, we did that, after there were wildfires, there were budget shortfalls, and then of course the COVID relief stuff before we got reimbursed by the federal government. That's when the rating of this fund happened. But otherwise, it's supposed to be for, a real emergency. If we have catastrophic wildfires or whatever else happens. But at this point, majority Democrats say that we're in an emergency, and if they don't fund education and health care and some of the other things that they prioritized in the budget, that that people will suffer. And so they believe they are justified in raiding of the rainy day fund. Now, will it get replenished? We'll see what happens the rest of this year, and how revenues come in based on recent tax hikes and that sort of a thing. So we're going to be watching over the weekend to see if, in fact, Governor Ferguson's schedule is updated. Whether it's Monday or Tuesday, he signs that income tax. We're going to be there and hope to get some questions answered by the governor in person as to what he thinks the fallout from all this is going to be. And then immediately thereafter, I anticipate being able to update what initiative efforts look like and any legal challenges in the works look like as well. So thank you again for watching. I hope you had a great week. I know it's been crazy, so much going on. Enjoy the sunshine. Looks like it won't be all bad this weekend. And happy Palm Sunday for y'all on Sunday as we look toward Easter week. And I thank you for watching.